people that.
So can the Okay, good. So it's 4:35. Good afternoon, everyone, students in the classroom and the audience online. So it's a great honor. We have invited Vitalik, the lecturing person who has created Ethereum, to come to NTU again to share his latest view about the merge and what's next for Ethereum. So I don't think I need to have a thorough introduction of Vitalik. So actually, by being here, most of you guys know him, who he is. But I do want to say something about Vitalik. So he's the creator of Ethereum, the first discovered blockchain and cryptocurrency techniques through Bitcoin 2011. That's when he started, and was immediately excited by the technology and its potential. He co-founded Bitcoin magazine in September 2011. And after 2.5 years looking at what the existing blockchain technology and application has to offer, he wrote the Ethereum white paper in November 2013. And he now leads Ethereum research team and works on future version of Ethereum protocols, which is topic of today. So actually, we have known Vitalik for quite a few years when he first came to Singapore, and has been frequently visited NTU to talk to our students. And under his inspiration, we decided to offer this blockchain course some of you guys are taking. This is the third cohort of blockchain students we have educated at NTU, and some of them previous batches done some significant work in the field. I hope by having Vitalik online again, so we hope to inspire more techie person out of NTU. And anyway, we are Nanyang Technological University. We want to have we would like to train more talents in the technology space for our economy. That's our main vision. So with that, I'd like to invite Vitalik to start his sharing. Vitalik.
Okay, so hello everyone, good afternoon. So today I'll talk about the merge and talk a bit about what the merge is, how we got to the merge, and what it means for the Ethereum ecosystem, but then also a bit about some of the other things that are happening in the Ethereum ecosystem, and particularly how some of those things matter to Ethereum users, right? So the merge is probably the biggest single technical change that has happened to the Ethereum protocol since it started, right? So the merge happened about 2 months ago in September. And basically what the merge is the last step in the transition of Ethereum from proof of work to proof of stake, right? So proof of work is the earliest form of consensus that's used in blockchain protocols. Proof of work is used by Bitcoin. It's used by, Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold and like all of the crazier forks of Bitcoin. It's used in Zcash, hopefully for now. It's used in Dogecoin, hopefully for now. So a lot of the older blockchains use it. And the way the proof of work works is basically you have a large number of these computers that are running these calculations 24/7 until eventually on one of these calculations, one of these computers gets a lucky correct answer, and they're able to broadcast that answer along with a block, which is like this object that contains some transactions, right? And if they broadcast a block together with one of these like good results of a calculation, then that creates a valid block, they can broadcast it, and it gets added to the chain. Now, the reason why proof of work exists, right, is that it's there to make it artificially hard to create blocks. So basically to prevent a situation where an attacker pretends to be a large number of computers and kind of pretends to control the entire history and just add a whole bunch of blocks where they control all of them and not let anyone else's blocks in, right? So Proof of work is fairly simple. It works fairly well, especially at the beginning. It was very democratic. Like for the first 4 years of Bitcoin, when basically anyone could just mine, create blocks and get a reward of 50 BTC just by running these calculations on their computer. But over time, it became more professionalized. It became more specialized, and it turned into the system where the people are spending like billions of dollars a year creating these giant mining farms, right? Like these big boxes, like entire factories full of computers, and just running them 24/7, trying to create blocks to get a reward. So it became a very energy and efficient system. I think near the peak, well, even today, I think Bitcoin is using like more electricity than all of Singapore. And I think Ethereum, while it was proof of work, like it was better because it was smaller, but it was not too much better, like maybe 3 or 4 times less than Bitcoin, right? And so there's a lot of issues with proof of work, right? Like the energy efficiency thing is like a really big one. And then also the fact that it is energy inefficient also means that you have to constantly print coins to pay the people that are running these computations, right? And so there's concerns about economic sustainability. There's concerns, also some issues around security, like basically a lot of different issues. These issues were why proof of stake started to be developed, right? So the idea behind proof of stake is basically that instead of making it artificially hard to create blocks by requiring people to prove that they have these resources, by basically proving that they have a computer by running the computer 24/7, so instead of using physical resources, we use virtual resources, right? So to create a block, you have to sign that block with make a digital signature with an account where that account contains coins that are inside of the system, right? So instead of the block creation being limited by physical resources, how many computers you have, it's limited by digital resources, how many coins you have that are locked inside of the proof of stake system. So one way to I sometimes think about proof of stake is it's like simulated mining, right? Instead of you taking dollars and using those dollars to buy a computer and then running that computer 24/7, you take dollars and you buy 32 ETH, then deposit 32 ETH into the proof of stake deposit contract, and that's like a virtual miner, and it gets randomly assigned the right to create a block on average about once every 2 months, and the right to participate in making other kinds of messages in the Ethereum network. So this solves the energy efficiency issue. There is a very low amount of real resources being consumed, and it improves security, and as we'll see, it has a lot of other benefits. So getting to the merge is something that definitely took a long time, right? So the very first proof of stake related thing that we made or published is this blog post called Slasher back from January 2014. So actually, this was even about 10 days before the project was kind of quote officially launched in Miami, right? So like even from the very beginning, we were definitely actively thinking about proof of stake. But at the time, like if you read the tone of the blog post, it did not say we are definitely switching to proof of stake. It just said proof of stake is interesting. We are exploring it. Here is just one idea for how some of the weaknesses in proof of stake might be addressed. And this is a research direction we'll keep going. Right. So at the beginning, there was no commitments to be proof of stake. And I think also at the beginning, we really appreciated the kind of like democratic aspects of proof of work, that it just makes it possible for anyone to get part of the Ether supply because there's this mining mechanism. If you have a computer, you can run a program on that computer and you can get coins. Now, in November, there was this second blog post we published in 2014 that was called Weak Subjectivity, which basically this was a bit of a philosophical breakthrough on one of the big challenges of proof of stake. And this was the idea basically on the topic of like how to deal with attacks where an attacker starts a chain from sometime behind in the history, and like basically tries to create a chain that looks like it's stronger than the existing chain, but does this for free without consuming any resources, right? And so this was where ideas around slashing came in. This was like the weak subjectivity period, which is basically a minimum frequency, like a minimum number of, or a maximum interval between like 2 times in which a node goes online, right? So like your node has to go online at least once every, somewhere between 1 and 2 months right now to kind of get the full security benefits. So basically trying to like really understand what the trade-offs are. And in exchange for these trade-offs, we get a consensus algorithm that gives us like basically the same security for like maybe 10 or 20 times less cost, right? So end of 2014, weak subjectivity. Then in 2015 and 2016, we started like actually working on figuring out what would a consensus algorithm that has all of the properties that we want look like. So there were a lot of like very early ideas. There were a lot of simulations, consensus by bet. There were a couple of papers. It was a very fun era. I think actually, if you just like search Vitalik Casper FFG Twitter thread, you can probably find like there was this Twitter thread I made years ago where basically just detailing the history of Casper research, like 75 tweets, and you can find some details here. It's pretty fun. But in 2017, that was when we published the Casper FFG paper, which describes like the mechanism that the actual current version of Casper FFG uses. And then in 2018, we really started development of the beacon chain. So the beacon chain is this chain over here, right? The blue chain at the bottom. Basically, this is the Ethereum proof of stake chain. So development of the Ethereum proof of stake chain, like the code started in 2018. And then at the end of 2020, the beacon chain launched, right? So the Ethereum proof of stake chain has actually already been running for almost 2 years, but for the first 2 years, it was running in parallel with the proof of work chain. So the proof of work chain was still running the actual Ethereum system. Like everyone who was using Ethereum, interacting with Ethereum, was interacting with the proof of work chain, but it was still possible to deposit, become a staker, get rewards, do all of these things. And basically, the goal was to kind of run it as a test net for 2 years, but with actual real ETH, real deposits, real incentives, and give people time to get acquainted with proof of stake, build out the infrastructure, make sure that the network is stable, and all of these things, right? And then what happens here is basically what's called the merge, which is where the part of the block that actually has like basically transactions and state and like all of the things that users care about stopped being part of the proof of work block and started being part of the proof of stake block, right? So it's a very complicated procedure. Like people have compared it to like replacing the wings of an airplane while the airplane is flying. So there were lots of test runs. It took over like lots of simulations. It was done on like 5 different public test networks. And then there was a private test happening automated literally every week for almost a year. So very complicated procedure, but finally it happened, and it actually went well, which was good. Actually, I think most people were expecting something would break, but nothing did, which was great. So like there we have it, right? So after the beacon chain launched, about 1 year later, we just did like a simple hard fork that added some light client features and just like was just there to test the proof of stake chain's ability to upgrade. And then the second one is the merge that fully changes Ethereum over to proof of stake, right? So benefits. 99.95% electricity consumption, right? So like this is like probably, so this is measured in hash rate. So this is like 600K. So over here is a million billion, so a quadrillion hashes happening every second. And these are hashes that are much more complicated than Bitcoin's hashes. And so huge amount of electricity. And then here it's like basically nothing, right? All it is just like a few thousand regular computers. Then the consensus algorithm also has these other really nice benefits, right? So one of the ones so this is technically not something that's intrinsic to proof of stake, right? It's theoretically possible to make a proof of work algorithm that has like most of these benefits, but proof of stake also gave us an opportunity to like really redesign the consensus algorithm, have it be more sophisticated in a lot of ways. And one of the things that we really put a lot of effort into is this concept of parallel confirmations, right? So like who here is familiar with the concept of like waiting in 6 confirmations or waiting for 12 confirmations? Like who here has had to do that before? Okay, so a few people, right? Like if you've used Bitcoin or ETH to pay for merchant services, or if you've deposited to a cryptocurrency exchange, like if you generally, like they require you to wait for confirmations, right? And the reason why you have to do that in a, chain-based system is because in a chain-based system, every block is only created by one node, right? And so what happens if you see a transaction, it got included in one block, but then after that, there's two blocks that are created by bad guys, right? And so what they're going to do is they're not going to build on top of here. They're going to build on top of the previous block. And so if you have two bad guys, then they're just going to ignore your block. And then a transaction that looked like it was going in ends up not going in, right? And so in a chain-based system, you have to like wait a lot more time. You have to wait until your transaction is in a block, and then there's more blocks on top of it so that you can be sure enough that your transaction will get in, right? So that's waiting for confirmations. In the Ethereum proof of stake design, thousands of confirmations happen in parallel. This is this concept of attestations, right? So instead of like kind of blocks being both containers for transactions and voting, as they are in a chain-based system, in the Ethereum system, blocks are just containers of transactions. So transactions are objects that are sent by users. A bunch of them gets put into each block. And then attestations, where you have many thousands of them happening in parallel every slot, right? So this is a period of 12 seconds. So you get thousands of attestations within 4 seconds. Attestations are the voting. So this basically means that like after a few seconds, you already have a very high degree of security. And we actually see this in the data, right? So here so this is forked blocks, right? I think if you go to like etherscan.io/blocks/forked or something like that, you can find this page. Basically, these are blocks that looked like they were part of the chain, but then ended up not being part of the chain. Now, usually in this case, this usually did not even happen because of an attack. It just happened because like, oh, two people accidentally created a block at almost the same time, or one person had like high network latency, just like, lots of different issues, right? And you can just see how close together they are, right? You have like at least 5 blocks within the same hour, and then you have 3 forked blocks within this hour. So one block is like basically not good enough. This is post-merge. This is like basically all the forked blocks recognized by Etherscan post-merge, right? Like basically, it's like 7 in like 40 days, right? So why is that? Well, because instead of having confirmations happen in series, you have thousands of confirmations happen in parallel. And so once one block appears, you have a huge number of votes that are supporting that block very quickly. And so very quickly, even after like 3 seconds, it becomes almost impossible for another block to beat this block. Now, why do these happen at all? So from the analysis that we've made so far, each and every one of these situations happened because there was some problem with the block and the block was proposed late, right? So the block was supposed to be sent at like time t, and instead that block only made it across the network at like time t+7 or t+12 or something crazy. And so a few nodes saw the block, but then other nodes didn't saw the block. So basically, like if the block proposer is screwed up, then you just can't avoid having a risk for that one slot. But in every other situation, the chain was fine, right? So better chain security, better chain stability. It's also more difficult to attack the chain. Proof of stake also makes it easier to make future upgrades in a lot of ways, and it requires a lower issuance, right? So the amount of ETH that was being issued to pay for block rewards was somewhere around, I think like a bit under 5 million a year before the merge, and now it's like less than 1 million a year, right? And I think maybe like something like 600,000-700,000 a year or so. And we get like a much higher level of security for that, right? So that's the merge, right? It's a very complicated technical project, but it has a lot of benefits. The confirmations, I think, are actually a pretty significant benefit to users, right? Because as a user, like exchanges can safely wait fewer confirmations, like merchants can safely wait fewer confirmations. Like it's basically, if you were waiting for like 6 or 12 confirmations before, it might be actually safe to wait for 2 or 3. And then there's this finality mechanism where if you are willing to wait 15 minutes, then you get this hard guarantee that the chain just like won't be reverted at all, right? So a lot of very good benefits here, and including things that like even regular users are going to care about, right? So after the merge, what are the next steps? Great. So a few big problems, right, that I think are important to the users in like Ethereum and in the crypto ecosystem in general, and I think it's like important to remember that technical problems in the crypto space are still a big deal, right? Like sometimes people ask, oh, why aren't there more mainstream applications yet? And it's like, well, have you tried using like, a blockchain just as a normal user, right? So like, for example, like I personally, over the last 10 years have tried many times to use Bitcoin and use Ether and use Zcash, used a lot of cryptocurrency options just to like pay for coffee and pay in person in restaurants. And here are some of the problems I've had, right? So problem one, sometimes the fees are high. Like last year, sending a regular transaction, the fee was about $5. Now it's a bit lower. The fee is like somewhere between 10 and 50 cents, but that's only because we're in a bear market. If there's a bull market next year, it's going to be $50. So problem one. Problem two, what happens if my internet as a consumer doesn't work, right? Cell internet is very far from being 100% reliable, especially if you enter a store. A store is inside. Buildings are made out of all kinds of different materials. Sometimes those materials block good cell service. And so sometimes you're trying to pay, and just when you're about to pay, internet stops working for 1 minute, and you send a transaction, and you're like, why isn't it sending, right? So problem two. Problem three. You send the transaction, and then it turns out that your fee was too low, and then you have to wait like 40 minutes for the transaction to get in, right? Problem four, even if the internet works perfectly, it's like the user experience is still not great, right? Because you have to like take out your phone, open your phone, scan the QR code, enter the amount, pay, then like wait 12 seconds, wait some number of seconds, and like eventually maybe it succeeds, right? So it's actually interesting. Like one of the things that I just realized after trying a lot of different payment options, like even the centralized wallets, right? Like even centralized stuff like GrabPay, it's just like, it's much less convenient than using a credit card, right? Because like with a credit card, you just tap. And so like basically, there's just in any use case, whether it's offline or online, like fees, user experience issues, security issues. People don't want to hold, $1 million in a wallet where if they accidentally lose their private key, they lose they lose all their money. Like all of these things are still big problems, and they're still and these problems are big enough to be completely holding crypto back, right? Now, why am I saying this? This all sounds like bad news, right? Now, actually, it's good news. Now, the reason why it's good news is because it means that the problems that crypto is having today might actually be solvable, right? Because these are just technical issues, like reducing fees, technical issue. If we make the blockchain 100 times more scalable, fees go down by 100x, done. Waiting for a transaction to be confirmed. EIP 1559 actually improved that a lot already, right? Like 3 years ago, if you send a transaction, sometimes it takes 1 minute, sometimes it takes 5 minutes, sometimes it takes 10 seconds, sometimes an hour. It was like very weird and very unreliable. Today, send a transaction almost always gets included within like 2 or 3 blocks. After the merge, even more reliability, right? Because proof of work blocks, the block time is like a Poisson process, right? So on average, it was 13 seconds, but like sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 11, sometimes it's 59, and like on average, when you send a transaction, on average you would have to wait 13 seconds, and there's like a big long tail, and you might have to wait more. Proof of stake is like clockwork, 1 block every 12 seconds. And so when you send a transaction, on average, you only have to wait 6, right? It's this is actually a very fun mathematical paradox, right? It's like for some distribution, on average, a block comes every 13 seconds, but if you send a transaction, on average, you wait 13. Regular block times, blocks come every 12 seconds. When you send a transaction, on average, you wait 6, right? But it's, like things have happened that make the layer 1 payment experience already much better, right? And even more things can be done, right? More things are being done in the layer 2 ecosystem. So a lot of layer 2 rollups, they have a pre-confirmation system. There's more projects trying to improve things at layer 1. There's, so that's payment speed. And then, if we start like talking about convenience, we're starting to have things like stable coins, and so you don't have to deal with volatility as much. And if one person has one currency, another person wants to receive another currency, you could even make UIs that just automatically push the payments through Uniswap, and we can make Uniswap cheaper if we have more scalability. Security issues, so the wallet security problem. There's this idea called account abstraction that I'll talk about later, right? So basically, a lot of these things are technical issues, and these technical issues can be solved, right? And so then the question is, well, what will the crypto ecosystem actually look like when these technical issues are solved? And when using a blockchain actually is like basically almost as convenient as using a centralized system, then what things will be possible that are not possible now? And I think. Obviously, the people building the actual applications are going to have much more to say about that than we do, but I think the answer is a lot, right? So stuff that we're doing to solve the big problems. So dank sharding, this is the big thing that's happening after the merge. So this is the thing that a huge number of core developers are like really 100% focused on making happen right now, right? So dank sharding is this scaling solution where the chain, where we basically add this extra type of transaction called a data transaction. And a data transaction carries a large amount of data, right? So one of these could carry like 128 kilobytes, and there could be more than 100 of these in each block, right? Now, you might ask, well, what is the point of the blockchain just carrying huge amounts of data? Now, well, the point is rollups, right? So the most successful layer 2 protocols that exist right now, Optimism, Arbitrum, Starknet, Scroll, the whole family, they are what are called rollups, right? And rollups are interesting because they are much more scalable than layer 1. They benefit from layer 1's security, so they can be as secure as layer 1, but the thing that the one trade-off that rollups have to make is for every transaction a user makes, rollups still have to put a small amount of data on chain. Rollups have to prove that a small amount of data has been published, and that if anyone wants to download it, they can download it, right? Basically, to prevent what's called data availability attacks, where someone makes a bunch of operations in that rollup, but then doesn't actually publish the information for what they did, and that kind of like prevents a lot of users from being able to do anything with their account, right? So it turns out that data availability attacks are this very fundamental problem, and rollups just like publish a small amount of data. So an optimized rollup could publish like, I think, about 23 bytes per transaction. It depends on the use case. So like for a money use case, you could do 16 bytes. For like more complicated Ethereum stuff, 23 bytes. If you want to be privacy preserving, 48, right? But if you're a small amount of data on chain per transaction, and by doing that, these rollups could enable a much higher amount of transactions per second that's limited only by the amount of data bandwidth available. So rollups exist today, but they just use regular chain data today. With full dank sharding, the goal is to have 16 megabytes every 12 seconds, right? So that's 1.3 megabytes per second. And then if you divide that by 23, you're going to get like somewhere between 55 and 60,000 transactions a second. And then this number can increase even more in the future, right? So why does there's like really fascinating and cool math involved in making dank sharding work. Like one of the challenges with a lot of like making chains high performance and high throughput in general is that you end up putting a lot of pressure on users that are running nodes, right? So if you look at some of the more centralized blockchains and how they work, they generally just like say, oh, we're only going to have 300 nodes and they're only going to run in like big servers and only a few people do it. And most people don't run a node and most people don't need to care, right? And so basically they just kind of surrender toward being mostly a centralized system. In Ethereum, we do not want to do that. And we want running a node to be very accessible. And so instead, there's this technique called data availability sampling, which is this kind of collaborative verification idea, right? Basically, every user randomly chooses a small portion of the block, and they verify that that portion of the block has been published. And there is kind of fancy erasure coding polynomial math that basically means that like if more than half of a block is available, you can regenerate the entire block. And like basically, you know, every single node that would be connecting to the network would be downloading a little bit of data and would be participating in verification. And then to actually verify computations, these rollups would be, I think we're going to see more ZK rollups over time. So they'll just use snarks, right? Which are just cryptographic proofs. You verify one proof and you verify that like a huge amount of computation that has a particular result was done correctly. So a lot of very fascinating math, but the result of this basically is that we have these layer 2 protocols that sit on top of blockchains that should be able to process many tens of thousands of transactions a second, so much more than today, right? So rollups. So account abstraction, this is the other really fascinating one, right? Basically, this is there to solve this other problem of wallet security, right? So the wallet security problem is pretty simple, right? It's like, okay, imagine if we completely solve scalability and then, yay, every time you send a transaction, you don't have to send $5, you don't have to spend $5 on a fee, you only have to spend like 3 cents. Okay, 20 transactions later, you've you saved $99.40. Amazing. But then one day you're, you accidentally slip and fall while running on top of a bridge, and your phone drops down into a river, and you never find your phone again, and you lose your private key, and $100,000 gone, right? So things like this happen to people. There's $100,000 is nowhere near the top of what people have lost, right? So account security is a very big deal. And this is like one of the really important topics for crypto, right? Because one of the arguments that like people who prefer centralized finance and like more centralized web applications tends to make is like, oh, users cannot manage their own keys. And so we need to have centralized institutions manage people's accounts because if you lose your account, you should be able to like go call the centralized institution and they can like go and recover the account for you, right? Now, by the way, I actually think that like one of the reasons why this argument is overrated is that like actually the centralized institutions suck much more than advertised, right? So like I've had lots of friends who have lost Gmail accounts because they forgot their password, or for like lost Twitter accounts because they forgot their password. They go and contact support and they just get nowhere. Like sometimes they only get their accounts months later, and sometimes even only because like I personally poke people, right? So very nice and very egalitarian system, right? So what does account abstraction do? Basically, the idea is that you have these two extremes, right? One extreme is that, like, you only have one key, and that one key is always with you on your device, and your security does not depend on anyone, but if your device drops in a river, you're screwed. The other extreme is like Coinbase manages everything, but you have to trust Coinbase. You have to trust Coinbase to like actually be good with recovering, and you have to trust Coinbase to not get ordered by the government to seize your funds, and you have to trust Coinbase to just trust them in a lot of different ways, right? And so you have these two extremes where one is just kind of not like really not enough security for normal people, and the other extreme is just like a huge amount of centralization, right? And the way that I think about account abstraction is opening up the entire space in the middle, right? So one example of this is what I call a social recovery wallet, right? So here's how a social recovery wallet works. You have your coins that are in an account, but that account is not just controlled by one key. That account is controlled by a smart contract, right? A smart contract is just, a computer program on chain, the same kind of thing that you use to build applications, right? And that smart contract has these rules. There is a key, and that key has the ability to assign and send transactions. but then there is also a list of guardian keys, right? Let's say there's a list of 7 guardian keys. And if 5 of those guardian keys agree, then they can change the main signing key, right? So the theory would be that like these 7 guardian keys, you could have some of them, in a piece of paper at home. Some of them could be institutions. Some of them could be your friends. Some of them, could be family members in different places, right? And so if you lose your key, then you just like basically, call up your friends and like get them to help recover your account. And, they know who you are, and they're not going to like wait for 3 months and do nothing because, you're not actually their customer, you're their product. So like, no, here you're their friend, and, they'll actually help recover your account. And so basically, you get the solution where we take like a one step away from like you having to manage everything for yourself, but we were still not relying on centralized institutions. Like we get this thing in the middle that actually gives people a lot of security in a way that makes sense for a lot of normal users, right? So what does account abstraction? Basically, it's a set of protocol extensions that make it easier for people to have these smart contract wallets, right? So instead of the default type of wallet being a wallet controlled by one account, the default type of wallet would be a smart contract, and it becomes very easy to do these things. It becomes very easy to have a social recovery wallet. It becomes very easy to have a multi-sig wallet where you need multiple keys to sign off to do anything. Like that might be good if you have like a larger amount of money and you want to be more careful. It makes it easier to have wallets that use different kinds of cryptography. So if you're paranoid about quantum computers, you could use one, and you'll be protected. So it just basically, it opens up the space for people to like actually work on making these solutions to make account security better, right? So, and there's this is something that's also already happening, and there's already wallets that are using account abstraction that are being developed. So I think so. The long-term goal is definitely to get toward a point where the Ethereum protocol is stabilized, right? To get toward a point where the Ethereum protocol does not actually need to change much. And the reason why I think we can get there is because the Ethereum protocol is general purpose, right? It's not meant to include new features for every single application that people might want to do, right? Once the Ethereum protocol is powerful enough, anything else that you want to do should be buildable as an application or a layer or some kind of protocol on top of it, right? So the question is like, well, what is the set of features that Ethereum needs to have to actually get there? And we think we have, approximately the answer, right? So there's definitely still a lot of stuff that needs to be done, right? And so I think for the next couple of years, we are definitely entering this period where like there are going to be a lot of these scaling and proving and accounts and like all of these changes happening to the Ethereum protocol. But what the final protocol is going to look like is definitely something that's starting to stabilize already. And the goal is to get to a point where everyone can like sit back and be happy and know that like they're not going to lose their coins to high fees, and they're not going to lose their coins to people stealing them, and like everyone's lives on chain are going to be great. And hopefully this will enable a lot of amazing applications.
Okay, so now it's time for questions and answers. So I will start from our students in the classroom. So if you want to ask question, just raise your hand. Wow. Okay, so I'll start from this one. Okay, looks like NTU students. Yeah.
Hi, Vitalik. My name is Neil. I'm from Modal, Singapore developer community, and I'm also a student at NTU. So my question is about your latest tweet about your roadmap, the Scourge.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to know more about how your solution will fix the problem of MEV.
Yes. Okay. So MEV is definitely a very important topic, right? So for people who are not familiar with this, basically the idea here is that because there's a lot of different applications that are on Ethereum, and a lot of these applications are fairly complicated, right? And these applications often create opportunities for whoever creates the next block to make extra revenue by choosing what the first transaction in that block is, right? So like one example might be like, if you have something like Uniswap, like a decentralized exchange on Ethereum, then if, anytime a new block comes in, there will already be like events happening outside of Ethereum, trades on the market, like different stuff will happen that will have already changed the prices of all of the assets that are being traded on chain, right? And so the Uniswap that's on chain will already have, like, its price will already be mismatched against the price in the kind of wider off-chain world. And so the price on Ethereum then, like, basically there's going to be an arbitrage opportunity, right? Like you can buy up some amount of tokens at either below market price or sell some amount of tokens at above market price. And this arbitrage opportunity goes to whoever can choose what the first transaction in the block is. And so the issue here is that actually choosing this transaction and kind of crafting the transaction to extract all of this revenue, that requires sophisticated algorithms, right? Like that requires algorithms that are aware of what the exchanges are, that are aware of what all the DeFi applications are, that are aware of just all of these things that are happening, in the chain and in the ecosystem around the chain, and so, you do need to like really put in a lot of work. You need to be like a very skilled professional to like really be good at extracting revenue from this, right? And so the thing that everyone was concerned about years ago is that like, oh, is the fact that like you need to have these specialized algorithms going to turn into a kind of centralization pressure that basically where only the top staking pools are going to, like only the one or two largest stakers will be able to get that revenue. And so they'll have more revenue than everyone else. And so everyone will join them. And so the network will centralize, right? So what Flashbots did about 2 years ago is they created like basically an open market version of the same thing, right? Where instead of staking pools or individual stakers well, back then it was miners, now it's stakers, right? Instead of them having to do all of this themselves, they can contract out to third parties, and third parties could say like, hey, if you let me choose the first transaction, then like I'll pay you this amount of ETH, right? And like basically create this open market to let kind of specialists that are good at choosing these transactions contract out with all of the miners and all of the stakers, the big ones and the small ones, right? So this, I think, successfully prevented kind of like staking centralization, but it also created this new centralization vector where you have a fairly small number of actors that are like actually choosing which transactions go into blocks, right? So right now, instead of miners or instead of stakers creating blocks themselves, stakers are going through this market and they're outsourcing the block production role to third parties, right? And because of the limitations of kind of the first versions of these protocols, the block producer, the validators, they're basically outsourcing the entire block production role, right? So they're basically saying like, hey, I'm going to open up an auction and anyone can give me proposals for the entire block, and I'm going to accept one that has the highest bid, right? And there's a few people that are very good at like creating these blocks, and so those few people are getting like very high amount. They're basically, there's like one actor that is producing like about 60% of the blocks in Ethereum, right? Now, this is like actually less bad of a problem than it seems, right? Because like even if you have one actor that's producing 80% of the blocks in Ethereum, then if let's say you have a transaction that one actor does not like, then you only have to wait 5 blocks until on average, until you get a block produced by someone else, right? So like block production is not consensus, right? So like block production does not have 51% attack problem. Block production only has a problem if it goes up to 100% attack, right? But at the same time, like, it's definitely still more of a problem than a lot of people would like, and people are concerned about slippery slopes. And these are all very fair and very good concerns, right? So what are we doing to mitigate the situation today? Basically, the short-term technical idea is has to do with what's called partial block auctions, where instead of having like a full auction system where I, as a block proposer, say like, hey, I'm accepting bids to create a block and you can put in whatever you want. We instead have a system where the block proposer can put conditions on what the block has to include, right? So the conditions might be like, hey, I saw these 10 transactions, and so your blocks have to include these 10 transactions. Or the condition might be, you get to choose the first 5 transactions, but I'm choosing the rest of the transactions, right? So basically, like, make the auction mechanism more sophisticated and like bring back some of the freedom of choosing the contents of the block to the proposer. And so we have kind of more of a balance between the proposers and what are called builders, kind of these actors that everyone is outsourcing to, right? And so then, instead of just relying on one group, there's kind of a balance, and either one of the two actors in the chain could decide to include a particular transaction, and that creates like a stronger guarantee that any transaction that people send like actually will be included very quickly into the chain.
Thanks, Vitalik. I remember last year's talk was mainly about scalability, right? It's great to see like an important invention in computer science, like a zero-to-proof, finally be used in like a large application like Ethereum. Can you comment more about how do you think about a zero-to-proof ZKP's applications in like blockchain, like privacy, and also outside blockchain domain, like see the future of it?
Yeah, so I think like, first of all, like the rise of zero-knowledge proofs in Zcash and ARCs has been very fascinating and just like very powerful and impressive for the last 5 years, right? Like one analogy that we might make is it's kind of similar to what's happening in AI, right? Like remember in AI, the theory 10 or 15 years ago was more that like you had to make very specialized AIs to solve specific use cases, right? And if you had specific problems, like you had to tune a lot of parameters, you had to like tune features and create different designs, and like different designs for recognizing cats, different designs for playing Go, the thing for playing Go probably had to like have very Go specific logic in it. And what happened since then, right? Everyone's just like, oh, screw all that, you just use transformers, right? So like basically, Zcash and ARCs are kind of doing a similar thing to crypto in that I think like 5 years ago, people did not expect Zcash and ARCs to like actually be just like viable from a like scalability and an overhead point of view. And so there was a lot of thinking about these like very specialized algorithms for very specific problems, right? So, if you want scalability, then like you use fraud proofs. If we want like some data availability sampling, then like, maybe you could use KCG in this one piece, or before that, we were talking about using Merkle proofs and using fraud proofs over Merkle proofs. And then, okay, if you want to use aggregate signatures, you can use BLS in this one place. And like, it was much more around like, 100 different tools for 100 different problems. And now it's like, if you see a problem, put a Zcash snark on it, right? Like that's basically the direction that protocol research is going. And Zcash snarks have made like these huge advances in the last few years that have made it possible to think this way. So I think in particular, the Plonk team, right? Like, so it's Aztec and a couple of other researchers can really be thanked for this, right? Because what Plonk did is they first, I think they really helped create this kind of very general framework where you split up the problem of a Zcash and ARC into 2 subproblems that are completely separate. One of the subproblems is what's called arithmetization, right? Which is basically take the problem when you want to prove and find the most efficient way to convert it into polynomial equations, right? So polynomial equations are like, P of x plus P, or P of x plus 1 equals P of x times C of x plus Z of x times something, right? So like very simple math statements that are made out of polynomials. And then the second component is what's called polynomial commitment schemes, which are basically let you take polynomial equations as an ingredient and make like very simple proofs that just solve that one problem, right? That just let you prove simple mathematical statements between polynomials, right? And so you solve those 2 problems separately, right? And so you can actually have kind of 2 separate communities working on both. And then if you make a good arithmetization, then you can apply it to KZG and you can have a snark that works now. You can also apply it to Fry, which is based on hashes. And so you have something post-quantum. And so, both of them could kind of go separately, right? Now, then the other thing is that they invented a lot of these really nice specific tricks. So lookup is one of the most famous ones that basically lets you, it's an arithmetization that lets you very efficiently prove lookup operations, right? So if you want to do, if you have an operation where the inputs and the outputs are all in a small range, then you can, small range, think 1 to 100,000, for example, right? Like less, the size of the range is less than the number of, than the size of the program. Then you can prove that in one constraint, right? And then you can take more complicated stuff and you can decompose that into these medium-sized operations and prove them very quickly, right? So a lot of these different tricks that are like this were invented, and this allowed, for example, ZK EVMs to happen, right? I think 4 years ago, people were thinking oh, we're going to have to make a new specialized virtual machine and redesign everything to be friendly to snarks. But now it's oh, well, okay, fine, the EVM is kind of screwy, but politics is hard and doing tech and math in a corner is easy. And so we're not going to bother changing the EVM, and we're just going to make a snark for the EVM as it exists, even if it's a bit ugly, right? And maybe we'll change the EVM later, but we don't have to yet. So what happened there as a result, right, is that we have all these amazing teams that are basically just doing snarks for the Ethereum virtual machine. There is even a project that did a snark of the Ethereum Lite client, and Ethereum Lite client. There's just all of these snark projects that are happening, right? And this is just making scalability research, and it's simpler. It's making protocol design a lot conceptually simpler. It has a lot of benefits, right? But this is all on the scalability side, right? Also on the privacy side, right? So zero knowledge, these ZK snarks, they're a bit of a confusing technology because they do two very important things very, very well, right? And sometimes people think of them in one way or think of them in the other way, but the reality is the exact same technology does both, right? Which is just super amazing. And the two things that they do is scalability and privacy, right? So in some ways, ZK snarks are a perfect complement for blockchain technology, because what do blockchains do? They give you these really nice guarantees of openness, transparency, guaranteed execution, censorship resistance, neutrality, but at the cost of two very big things. One is scalability, one is privacy. Well, what does ZK snarks solve? Scalability and privacy, right? So blockchains plus ZK snarks are actually an incredibly powerful combination for that reason. So we talked about the scalability side in ZK rollups and how scaling is basically potentially going to be improved by a factor of thousands. On the privacy side, ZK snarks let you do things more privacy preserving payments, more privacy preserving identity and reputation systems. They let you prove some things about yourself while hiding other information about yourself. So you might even be able to prove that you're not a bad actor without revealing anything else about who you actually are to anyone. You can, just any application that exists today, you can redesign that application to make that application look much more private, right? So that, a lot of different projects that are happening there, which is, I think, amazing. And there'll be much more happening on that in the next 5 years.
Sure. But switch to online question one.
Okay.
Some audience asked a question, how will stakers using service provider like AWS, Google Cloud affect Ether's decentralization promise?
It's a good question. I mean, it's definitely a concern. So we did actually add some very intentional logic into the protocol to discourage people from doing this. Basically, so this is a very kind of fun kind of evil game theory trick. So if you as a staker get slashed, right? So if you get penalized for doing something wrong, your penalty is proportional to the number of other people that get slashed at the same time as you, right? So if you're a staker and you have 1% and you get slashed, you'll lose a little bit. If you're a staker and you have 20% and you get slashed, you'll lose 60% of your money. If you're a staker and you're on AWS and 30% of the network is on AWS and someone hacks AWS and slashes it, well, guess what? Everyone who's on AWS loses 90% of their money, right? Now, so this gives you an incentive to kind of stake separately from other people, use different technology from other people, because even if your technology is like on average less reliable, as long as it's as the faults of your technology are not correlated with the faults of other people's technology, on net you're going to pay less penalties and you're going to contribute to the Ethereum network being more reliable and secure, right? So we kind of intentionally try to economically discourage staking in the same way as, or on the same cloud platforms as everyone else. Though at the same time, we also are trying more and more kind of like not just with a stick, but also with a carrot, and making it easier and easier to stake at home, making it easier to get the benefits of pooled staking while being a solo staker, making it easier to run a node and all these things. And like a big part of the scaling roadmap is also about all of those goals.
Okay, thanks. I'm trying to.
Okay, I'll try to maybe get lots of questions and like, yeah, sure. Okay, I'll try one sentence answer each. Okay, go. Okay.
Hi, my name is Kent, NTU alumni and currently investor in a crypto fund called GSRV Fund. My question has to do with the type of work in the proof of work chain, right? A lot of people are criticizing proof of work chains because they're consuming a lot of energy, and a lot of those work are doing meaningless work but valuable, but to protect, right, the fair distribution. What if people can make sure that those work are meaningful?
Okay, so there has been actually a lot of people that have attempted to do this, and generally the problem is that it's just extremely hard to find a computational task that is both meaningful and easy to verify, and like doesn't rely on external data that you have to trust, and that continues to be useful long enough to be a proof of work task. So unfortunately, like it's you need so many properties to be a good proof of work that it just like in practice did not end up working, which I think is sad. Yep.
About the generalized proof, that I think current Ethereum is not very supportive for the ZKP because it costs a lot of time to do the transaction stuff. So I know some researchers trying to design new ZKVM, and there's also some ZKVM stuff. So can you give me some your personal idea, like which one is the most good, or maybe the most useful, efficient solution to make Ethereum is more friendly for the ZKP stuff?
So there are a few specific parts of the Ethereum protocol that are particularly not ZKP friendly, such as, for example, the hash functions and BLS signatures and particular details of the memory design. And our goal in the long term is to try to identify those specific components that cause most of the problems and replace them with better, more ZK friendly pieces.
I don't study computer science or anything. I just want to ask like a more macro question. So you mentioned just now that one of the barriers to using blockchain technology in everyday transactions is like the high fees, right? Perhaps I want to ask on that tangent, how can businesses be incentivized to use blockchain or Ethereum when it is subject to the volatility of price, as Ethereum price fluctuates, as well as, macro conditions, because.
Okay, so I think artificially incentivizing crypto use is unsustainable and a bad frame, basically because as soon as the incentives disappear, people stop using the system, right? Like, for example, El Salvador even mandated people accept Bitcoin, and there are a lot of projects that's incentivized with yield and all of these things. But what happened was that even in the El Salvador case, lots of people just stopped using Bitcoin, and as soon as all of the yield farming incentives disappeared, people stopped using the project. So I think ultimately, we can't rely on external incentives, and we do have to rely on some kind of more genuine alignment of needs between what actually directly benefits users in a sustainable way.
Hi, I'm doing the blockchain course this semester, and I've learned a lot about the great work you guys, the team, is doing at Ethereum. I wanted to understand how you, especially right now, as you're contributing a lot to the project yourself, how a centralized source of development reconciles with the decentralized nature of the blockchain, and if you have any plans to sort of make the transition.
So I think Ethereum development has been actually getting more and more decentralized over the last few years already, right? Like for example, the percentage of EIPs that get done without my involvement at all is getting higher and higher. The percentage of things that originate outside of the Ethereum Foundation has been getting higher and higher. And the extent to which non-Ethereum Foundation actors are participating and the community is kind of raising its own voice on issues is increasing. So I think things are getting better and only continue to get better. Okay, here.
Thank you so much for the sharing, Vitalik. I'm Neil. I was the research fellow of NTU, and now I'm also the founder of Radio. So we actually work with Stockbear on the ZK Star EX scaling. My question is like, do you have any timeline for like the benchmarking when that one will be done? And once it's done, right?
I think people are expecting EIP 4844 to be out sometime next year. The optimists are saying spring, the pessimists are saying closer to the end of the year. And I expect it'll take another like maybe 3-5 years, I don't know, to get to full dank sharding.
Once it's done, do you see this competing with other layer 2 solutions?
Dank sharding does not compete with other layer 2s. Dank sharding creates space for other layer 2s to exist and have more scalability. Yeah. Someone in the back. Okay. In the back.
Hi, I'm Avdesh, and my question is, what do you think about decentralized identity, soul-bound tokens, and what is Ethereum doing in this space right now? Thanks.
So I think decentralized identity is actually the most rapidly growing category of Ethereum applications, and I think the reason why it's finally succeeding is because it's growing in a very organic way. So not like some of the previous decentralized identity projects that were trying to have one company create a full stack, but instead, with an ecosystem where you have like ENS and you have sign in with Ethereum and you have attestations with things like Proof of Humanity and Pope, and you have all of these services plugging into each other. And I expect the Ethereum identity layer will only continue to get stronger as all of those services continue to get adoption, and the network effects between all of them get stronger. Okay, good.
Hi, Vitalik. Thanks for the talk. So a high-level question, I guess. So in your mind, what is a killer app to blockchain, like the Google to internet?
I have never believed in a killer app. I've always believed in killer ecosystems. Like, I think the biggest benefit of blockchains is that apps can talk to each other and build off of each other very easily. And I think we've already seen lots of examples of that, like DeFi and composability that DeFi enables being a big one, and composability within the Ethereum identity ecosystem is something that I expect to be a big one. So I don't expect there to be like any one single application that massively kind of beats out all of the others. Maybe, payments will continue to be dominant, but otherwise the benefit will just come from all of these things talking to each other.
Hi, my name is Aaron. I'm actually wondering, how do you see Ethereum like kind of colliding or working together with like regulations so that people can like, start using it in the future when it becomes more stable?
That's the regulation's definitely a challenging and important topic, but I think the answer is going to be very different for different kinds of applications, right? So the regulatory issues in the payment, the privacy of space, and regulatory issues with DAOs, and regulatory issues with making new kinds of DeFi products, and data protection issues with Ethereum identity. They're all different, and I definitely expect there to start to really be more concrete discussions happening in all of those areas over the next few years. And And from what I can tell, those discussions have started already. Okay. Okay. New rule, maximum 10 words a question. Sorry, just trying to get more people in.
Hi, Vitalik. Thanks for the excellent talk. So my question is very simple, perhaps. So do you think POS is more secure than POW?
Yes.
Why?
Okay. 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 Remember, don't like say, oh,
some students here. No.
Okay, just to like skip the, oh, you're amazing. My question is just start with the question directly. Yeah. Let's okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Buterin. I'm doing computer science PhD. So my question is that since you're talking about shift from POW to POS, you're also talking about increase the scalability. This does converge to the direction of Cosmo. Because when ETH is shifting to POS, it learn a lot. Learn from the implementation of Cosmo as well.
So the Ethereum and Cosmos are definitely getting more similar over time. I think the practical difference between their visions is that Cosmos believes in more fully independent blockchains with a weaker connection between them, whereas Ethereum believes in more tightly connected layer twos that still share security through the same layer one. And so that's like the biggest difference between them. And we'll see how that difference plays out.
Thanks. Can we later on, because we have a team running a Web3 project, can we later on take a photo with you? Thank you.
Next question. Okay. There.
I want to ask, what's the difference between DEX sharding and Celestia? They are both data availability.
Okay, so there's a lot of minor technical differences. Like, for example, Dank sharding uses KZG, Celestia uses Merkle proofs, and fraud proofs, and Celestia still relies on everyone in the consensus itself running a full node that stores all of the data, whereas Dank sharding does not. So there's a lot of different like small technical differences that add up. Okay.
Hello, Vitalik. I'm Zishi, and the student of NTU and a crypto investor of Matrix Partner. And at the same time, we see some of the teams that's the ZK EVM at the same time, and the Stacks Bills team maybe takes 3 to 4 years to finish the Type 4 ZK EVM. And at the same time, some teams just to finish the Type 1 ZK EVM. And I was wondering, in your opinion, what's the timetable, or how could we finish the Type 1 ZK EVM? Thank you very much.
Yeah, important question. I think what's going to happen is that within the next year, we're going to see things that are technically feature complete ZK EVMs and that can ZK verify full EVM blocks and like maybe even full Ethereum blocks, or at least the execution side of them. But those systems are going to be slow. They're going to take a large amount of time to make proofs, and they're going to have bugs, and those problems are going to take a longer amount of time to fully resolve. And the result of this is that we are going to have some form of working EVM ZK rollups pretty soon, but their quality will just like continue to slowly improve over time, and we'll have like fully amazing ZK rollups, in some longer amount of time, maybe 5 to 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Vitalik. Thank you for your great talk. I'm a student in computer science, and I am a student in quantum technology as well. So as we all know, quantum information is very hot nowadays. It won the Nobel Prize last week. And then we want to listen your opinion about how quantum technology, such as quantum computing and communication, will change the game in blockchain.
Right. So unfortunately, I haven't yet learned of like any positive way in which quantum computers and blockchains can interact. Unfortunately, the only thing I know about is that quantum computers will like break some cryptography algorithms and force us to switch to less efficient ones, which is unfortunate, but we already know what we're going to have to switch to. And so that's like a very predictable transition that we that we know how to do. But as quantum computers get closer, I'm sure people will start thinking more and more about some more specific examples of like what quantum computers and blockchains together could do.
Thank you. So I'm not a really tech student, but I'm a new intern of a Web3 gaming startup. So I have this question for you, which is nowadays we are seeing many Web3 gaming companies encountering that questions like problems like many gamers are speculators, and they're not really sustainable players, and the scale of Web3 gamers actually are very limited compared to traditional gamers. So I have this question: what do you think is a possible way to like make these gaming companies to really sustain and evolve? So do you think is it possible to force gaming companies to attract Web2 players and Web3 players?
I think the reason why the Web3 games have not been very successful so far is because Web3 game developers have like forgotten that they need to actually be fun even without the speculative side. So if someone when someone makes Web3 games that are not just fun as Web3 things but are fun as games, I think those will be successful and they'll be great. Yeah.
Okay. You can stand up.
So in the past, I also work a lot with dev technologies where usually the passing down of estate is a problem.
Yes.
So just now you were sharing that you want to add more layers with the smart contract and you need more people involved that has the secondary key. Would that add more complexity to it? Because for example, if the people with the secondary key also loses it or they passed away, sometimes you need a combination of this, and how some organizations deal with it is like, for example, Google, they have the in-account active manager. So you can actually appoint someone else in advance to have access to it. So I'm just wondering if you are doing the multi-layer or secondary key, would that?
Well, the nice thing about this is that it can be set up in a lot of different ways, right? Like you could even set it up recursively where if you have some number of recovery partners and then one of them needs to recover, like they can recover first and then they can recover you. So there's like and you could set the threshold to be lower. You could make sure to kind of renew every like check that every recovery partner exists like every 1 or 2 years. I think the fact that your recovery partners can just like be other Ethereum users that are hopefully also using that account for some other purpose, like that by itself will make the UX like better than a lot of the previous attempts at doing the same thing, right? So like from what I've so I think like account abstraction as a concept, right? Like it gives you a lot of space to like really design very good solutions around that. But I think we're obviously still at the first iteration of those solutions actually being made, and they're still kind of mostly being made within a particular community. But it's like I think first of all, it's a huge improvement over people just having the key themselves, right? And no one being able to recover, and it's and are there going to be problems that will lead to, or like will the design of how the recovery mechanism or signing mechanism works keep changing? Like I expect it will, but I expect like practical experience and will be kind of letting the industry mature is like the only practical way to do that. Okay.
Okay. So how do we understand the parallel chains? We know that the blockchain system is based on the longest chain mechanism. So is a parallel chain is a version of the future?
No, so it's not parallel chains, it's parallel confirmations, right? So like parallel confirmations are happening right now. Okay.
Any question from online? Check.
Hello, I am also a researcher of computer science. We are all glad to see the GPU price is already low down right now after the merge. But there are still some people and some other trade, they are stick on the old trade, which is still working on the proof of work. What's your opinion of their future?
So I expect that Zcash and Dogecoin are going to be the next two to switch to proof of stake. They've both expressed like very active interest in switching to proof of stake. And Zuko has been saying for years that he's going to wait for Ethereum to do it and then see what happens. And, you know, so far I think like Ivaki has said that the Ethereum merge has been a success, and the Dogecoin team is already in the process of very actively developing their transit switch to proof of stake. So I expect those two are going to be the big chains that move over to proof of stake fairly soon. And then aside from Zcash and Dogecoin, like what even are the other proof of work chains that matter, right? Like there's Bitcoin. I expect Bitcoin will just not switch because they're just, they're too kind of ideologically in love with proof of work. Litecoin also won't because Litecoin just follows Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin Cash, I just think they have like no development capacity and their community is crazy, unfortunately. I had high hopes, but this is the reality. Bitcoin, some of the forks of Bitcoin Cash might end up switching to proof of stake, especially if Dogecoin shows, because like Dogecoin software-wise is a Bitcoin D derivative, right? And so if Dogecoin does it, like it'll make it easier for other currencies that are Bitcoin D derivatives to kind of make a fork of the merge and just like basically copy over most of the code and keep it the same. So some Bitcoin alternatives, and then I expect Bitcoin and Litecoin to just like continue to be proof of work chains for a long time, maybe until and unless they have like some kind of a security crisis 20 years from now because there's not enough rewards or whatever, and then they might have to do something drastic. Well, like that's far future and we don't know yet.
Okay, now let's take two more questions from the online audience.
Perfect.
There was Professor Zufida asked, what do you think are the most important governance issues in Ethereum ecosystem?
Most important governance issues in the Ethereum ecosystem. It's a good question. I think, the biggest governance problem is always just kind of like Ethereum governance is performing, I think, quite well as it is in a lot of ways, but just trying to make sure that it doesn't get worse in any way, right? Like it's, I feel like in any governance system, especially if it's running, making sure it doesn't get worse is like always a challenge that people forget about, but still an important challenge. Another interesting one is, this is like a specific one that could be an improvement. So like how to make Ethereum governance better take into account the desires of users, right? Because like right now it's called like changes are made on something called the all core devs call, and to be on the all core devs call, like generally you have to be a core dev and like actually participate as a client developer. And so that does mean that like one particular constituency that has a particular set of values can has like a disproportionate amount of power in deciding what happens, right? And like the argument might be that like, oh, they're experts, they actually know what what the difficult trade-offs are. But on the other hand, like they are experts, but they also are like they're experts on technical properties of Ethereum, but they're not necessarily experts on what people use Ethereum for. And they might have they're a particular community, they have their particular biases, and so it is still important to find more ways for outside voices and people from these other communities to also be able to participate. And there are groups that are working on trying to like figure out how to make all core devs more inclusive, but it's like still a work in progress. So I think it's interesting.
Sure. So I'll ask on behalf of NTU students the last question here.
Okay.
So we have a lot of NTU computer science students or the engineering students here. So some of them would like to potentially in the future working on the blockchain or Web3. So what do you think of the most important skills or the core subject they have to as well at university?
I think there's like a lot of different ways to contribute to the space, right? So like if you're a developer, I recommend like learning about ZK snarks and being like being good at, making circuits and dealing with provers and all of this stuff, just because it's a really important field and it's a rapidly growing field and it's where all the cool stuff is happening. And it's where you can build things that other people haven't built 25 times already. I think understanding like people's needs in different parts of the world is important for the crypto space, right? Because like there's blockchain applications for people in Singapore, but then there's like blockchain applications for people in Latin America. And in areas where like the local banking system and local governments and local economy are much more dysfunctional than they are in Singapore, there's often like people are just in more desperate need of this stuff. And so like just traveling and understanding other places. I mean, even kind of, the local backyard and, Philippines and Vietnam and all of these places is, I think, also important, especially if you want to build things that help people in all of those places. There's, what other things? User interface design, also important, right? Like if you want to actually reach users, you need to be able to like build things that users find convenient. Also an important skill. Just like, yeah, definitely, yeah. How would I put this? If you're coming at this from more of a kind of like sales or management or kind of business side, then one of the important differences between crypto and the traditional world that's worth understanding is like the way in which the crypto world is like very community driven. And, you have to have like a very direct presence and talk to and understand your community. And like, they're going to want to be, very actively involved in making a project successful. So like, understanding one way to start might be understanding how community dynamics work in existing crypto projects and seeing like what things some projects do well and what things other projects don't do well. But like, yeah, basically like being able to look at crypto communities not just in the same way as in like traditional businesses and startups, but also as these kind of more horizontal systems where everyone in the community is participating in different ways.
So with that, I would like to thank Vitalik for his great talk again. So because yeah, so because Vitalik have to run for another event, so I have to take him to the transportation. So I hope the talk was insightful for the class. So we have to go to my office to pick up your stuff. We have to go because otherwise.
I know. How do I take this?